Welcome to the debate. Imagine you just spent 2 years driving this massive, highly successful project.
Okay.
It is exactly the kind of professional win that could instantly land you your absolute dream job. There is just one catch, though.
There's always a catch.
Yeah, exactly. The client was strictly confidential. You have all the proof sitting right there on your hard drive, but, sharing it out in the open could literally get you sued.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is like the ultimate professional anxiety, isn't it? We are constantly forced to balance that very real need to prove our capabilities with the, absolute necessity of protecting sensitive information.
Exactly. And today we are digging into the mechanics of the living professional record to figure that out. Specifically, we are looking at how we govern that boundary between private work and public proof.
Right, we're focusing on the doctrine from Module 6, that privacy labels protect the path from source to surface.
Yes. And I look at this framework, specifically the comprehensive 10-tier privacy label system, and I see an essential, precise taxonomy. I mean, privacy isn't a barrier here. It is exactly what makes your record trustworthy.
Well, I come at it from a slightly different way.
Oh?
Yeah, having 10 distinct categories for privacy sounds incredibly elegant in theory, but I kind of think that complexity is its Achilles heel. I mean, asking a worker to manage a sliding scale of 10 different labels introduces massive subjectivity.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on why that granularity is actually required. Let's break down what these labels actually are so we aren't just reading a list like a manual.
Sure.
These labels help the advisor and the client decide exactly how information may be used. Think of the 10 working labels in 3 functional buckets. You have your absolute boundaries, right? Things that are public, private, or completely exclude.
Right, the simple ones.
Exactly. Then you have your safe to summarize middle ground. So these are labels like shareable with care, redacted, summary only, metadata only, and interview memory.
Yeah, the tricky ones.
Right. And finally, you have your strict tech boundaries. So do not use externally and do not upload.
And juggling those 3 buckets is exactly where the friction starts for me.
But the brilliance of this taxonomy is that it doesn't just apply to a PDF or a JPEG. I mean, these labels do not apply only to files. They apply to abstract concepts.
What do you mean by that, practically?
Well, they may apply to evidence, claims, names, details, witnesses, AI inputs, renderings, portfolio items, and capstone materials. So it allows you to look at a project and say, the underlying evidence exists, but this specific claim is private.
Right.
It's like applying metadata directly to a memory. A claim may be private even if the evidence exists. That level of precision separates a governed professional record from just a reckless data dump.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that operational reality.
No?
No. Applying a label to an abstract concept like a detail or a witness name sounds great until you try to actually do it. Let's play that out in the real world.
Okay, let's hear it.
Say you have a piece of feedback from a manager. Let's call her Maria.
Okay, Maria.
The raw feedback is, great job on the Phoenix project, Maria. Now, the worker knows Maria is highly sensitive about her identity being out there.
Right, so they need to protect her.
Exactly. So they apply a private label to her name, but a summary-only label to the feedback itself. A witness name may be private, even if the feedback can be summarized.
Which is a completely valid use of the framework.
Sure, on paper. So they translate it to something like, manager feedback noted improved clarity and follow-up during the Phoenix project.
That sounds perfectly fine.
But here's the problem. Redaction isn't magic.
Well,
If the context, the timeline, or that specific project name, Phoenix, is still in the rendering, anyone looking at it who knows that company knows Maria was the only manager on Phoenix.
I mean, yes, context matters.
Right. The taxonomy demands this flawless execution where you have to instantly recognize when a supposedly safe summary actually burns the redaction and leaks an identity. It's too much cognitive load.
You say context leaks identity, and you're absolutely right. But that's exactly why those middle ground labels have to exist in the first place.
How so?
Well, if we only had a binary locked or unlocked system, You will be forced to completely discard Maria's feedback to protect her.
I guess you would, yeah.
You would lose the professional value of that evidence entirely. By splitting it up, labeling the name as private but the claim as summary only, the system forces you to pause. It makes you ask, what version of the truth belongs here?
But it doesn't stop them from making the mistake in the rendering.
Gives them the tool to manage it.
The system doesn't demand magic. It demands governance. It forces you to retain the value of the endorsement while actually honoring the boundary of consent.
Okay, let's talk about that pause. You say it forces the worker to evaluate context. If we acknowledge that context leaks identity, we have to look really closely at the safety of those middle ground labels.
Sure.
I want to challenge interview memory specifically.
Go for it.
The concept here is that you remember a highly confidential issue, and you are allowed to discuss it carefully in an interview without showing the internal documents, right?
Right.
Let's say you coordinated a highly sensitive internal process. You label that knowledge interview memory. So you're sitting in a high-pressure job interview.
Okay.
The hiring manager leans in and says, "Tell me about a time you fixed a broken internal process." You're sweating. You really want this job.
Typical interview nerves, yeah.
Exactly. And now you have to rely on a mental label to filter out the sensitive timeline or the specific personnel details in real time. Isn't that just a verbal leak waiting to happen?
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because you're entirely discounting the preparation phase.
Prep doesn't always survive contact with reality, though.
But that is exactly why professionals don't do this in a vacuum. They work with an advisor. You don't just walk into an interview with a vague interview memory tag floating in your head and hope for the best.
But people do panic in interviews. They want to prove they did the work.
They panic when they aren't prepared. The framework requires caution here. The advisor's role is to help you map out exactly what can be said, what absolutely cannot be said, and crucially, how to decline pushing for details professionally.
So you're basically rehearsing the redaction.
You rehearse the boundary, yes. But let's look at another one of those middle ground labels because this is where the system really saves a career. Metadata-only.
Right, where you just record the item type, approximate date, your role, and why it's relevant without keeping the artifact itself.
Exactly. And this is vital. Imagine you spent 5 years working on confidential military systems or, highly restricted healthcare workflows.
Where you can't take anything with you.
Right. You cannot keep those documents. You cannot show those documents. Without the metadata-only label, your living professional record is just a 5-year blank spot. The doctrine is to use the minimum necessary proof.
That's a compelling argument for preserving the worker's memory, I'll give you that. But let's look at the other side of the table.
What do you mean?
Does metadata alone actually carry enough weight to be considered proof in the marketplace?
Why wouldn't it?
Well, if you create a metadata-only entry for a massive internal process overhaul, and all you record is supported issue tracking during internal review, and you are strictly forbidden from showing the actual file,
Yes.
you are essentially asking the market to just take your word for it. Does this not completely dilute the concept of an evidence-based record?
It absolutely does not dilute it. It governs it.
It sounds weak, though.
A governed summary is not weak. It is incredibly precise. Let's use that healthcare workflow as an example. You have internal documentation, stakeholder coordination, patient data, all highly restricted.
Right, lots of red tape.
So, the public safe governed summary is supported documentation and coordination for a regulated implementation environment.
I mean, come on, that sounds like generic corporate speak.
It sounds like someone who understands compliance. That is a strong professional claim. The metadata-only and summary-only labels preserve your career history without exposing system names or protected data.
I see what you're saying.
It honors the core rule that privacy is a part of professional truth. The record is private by default, and these labels allow the truth to surface safely. Privacy labels protect the path from source to surface.
Look, I agree that the full record must be private by default. Nobody is arguing for a reckless data dump here.
Good.
And I agree that privacy is part of professional truth. But my concern is the sheer mechanical friction of tracking this over a 20-year career.
It's just organization.
It's more than that. You have to maintain a dedicated privacy log to track the item, the specific label, the reason it's restricted, the safe use version, and the forbidden uses.
Right.
That is a massive administrative burden for a normal person, and this brings me to the absolute biggest flaw in a 10-tier system: artificial intelligence.
Oh, I wouldn't call AI a flaw. It's just the modern reality.
It's a reality that breaks this taxonomy, though. When you have a worker juggling 10 different granular labels, what happens when this data interacts with a large language model?
They follow the labels.
But we know AI is fundamentally incompatible with traditional privacy models. Once it goes into the prompt, it's in the machine, it's out of your control.
That is exactly why the Do Not Upload label exists. It is arguably the single most critical component of the entire framework today.
In theory,
We know AI use creates massive privacy risks. If you dump a confidential client report into a prompt to generate resume bullets, you might be feeding trade secrets or protected patient info into an external server.
exactly my point.
But the Do Not Upload label establishes a hard boundary.
But it's just a label, it's not a physical wall.
It protects the path from source to surface by forcing you to use generalized, non-sensitive summaries before the AI is ever engaged.
If you follow it perfectly.
Think of it like a water filtration system. If you put the filter, the Do Not Upload label, at the very end of the pipe, your entire water supply, meaning your LLM prompt, is already contaminated.
Right.
You have to put the filter at the source. You take your governed summary, and that is what you feed the AI, instructing it not to invent metrics. AI is kept in its proper place as a downstream rendering tool, not a source layer processor.
Okay, but you're assuming perfect adherence to the labels. And that's where the friction of the 10 tiers causes the whole thing to collapse.
Collapse is a strong word.
Let's look at the incentives here. The living professional record is designed to be worker-owned. It's not employer surveillance. That's a fantastic shift.
Yes, it is.
But because it's worker-owned, you are inherently incentivized to maximize your proof to get your next job or promotion.
Of course you are.
So you have a highly motivated worker dealing with a complex 10-label system. The cognitive friction is incredibly high. Let's say you look at an internal project document. 3 years ago, you categorized it as shareable with care.
Which has specific restrictions.
Right, but it's late at night, you're updating your resume, you see shareable with care, and you assume, okay, that means it's safe enough to help draft a bullet point.
Ah,
So you copy-paste the document into the prompt. Boom. You just inadvertently bypassed the do not upload boundary entirely. By trying to maintain 10 distinct categories, you blur the lines.
I really don't think the lines are blurred at all. Shareable with care and Do Not Upload are entirely different operational states.
But to a tired professional, it's just a sea of tags.
I don't buy that.
If we had a simpler system, say, just private, summarized, and public, you create harder, more recognizable boundaries. AI makes this granular taxonomy fragile because a single mistake in copy-paste instantly and permanently exposes employer-owned material to an external server.
Okay, I see the risk you're highlighting. AI is unforgiving. But reducing the taxonomy to 3 labels would fundamentally cripple your ability to govern your own career history.
How? It would be easier.
If you reduce it to just private, summarized, and public, you lose the ability to differentiate between something that requires a carefully crafted summary and something that is strictly metadata only because you aren't even allowed to retain the original artifact.
I just don't think the average worker can parse the difference consistently.
That's why we have this framework. If we simplify it too much, the living professional record just becomes a reductive employability score.
Well, the granularity is exactly what prevents you from surrendering the source layer to a platform or an employer. It gives you the agency to say, this item is an interview memory, but this other item cannot be used externally under any circumstances.
I agree that you shouldn't surrender the source layer. The record absolutely has to serve the professional, not become some corporate dossier.
Exactly. But I still question whether an advisor can realistically train a client to execute this level of nuance without basically acting as an unlicensed attorney.
Wait, how so?
We know advisors have a strict non-legal boundary, right? An advisor can say, this appears sensitive, maybe we shouldn't upload it.
Right.
But they cannot say, you legally have the right to share this. When an advisor is sitting with a client, staring at a 10-tier system, deciding whether a classified corporate strategy document is metadata-only or exclude, they are walking a razor-thin line right next to legal, contractual, and regulatory compliance.
I'm not sure I agree with that characterization.
The sheer volume of labels practically invites conversations that border on legal interpretation.
That's an interesting point, though I would definitely frame it differently. The taxonomy is a professional governance framework, not a legal one.
It borders on it.
The advisor isn't giving legal advice, though. They are applying safe use discipline. The core instruction is always, when uncertain, default to protect.
But isn't that just a convenient way to dodge the legal question?
No, it's a way to de-escalate risk. By utilizing a label like do not upload or summary only, the advisor is actively steering you away from a potential legal minefield without ever having to make a legal conclusion.
Okay, that's fair.
They are simply saying, look, we don't need the original confidential file to prove you know how to do this. A governed summary serves our rendering needs perfectly. The taxonomy proves that the goal isn't to expose the absolute strongest, rawest proof.
Right.
The goal is to preserve enough governed proof to support your claims safely.
Defaulting to protection is definitely the right philosophical approach, and keeping a dedicated privacy log to track those exclusions so you don't accidentally trip up years later when you've forgotten the context is a rigorous way to manage it.
It is.
But I remain cautious. Asking someone to juggle interview memory, metadata-only, and summary-only across both physical files and abstract ideas requires a level of disciplined habit that most of us just don't possess naturally.
It takes practice, yes.
The human error potential, especially with AI sitting right there, is immense.
And that really brings us right to the core of this debate. To summarize my position here, this 10-tier privacy label system isn't just bureaucratic overhead.
Sure.
It is a necessary, sophisticated framework that honors the reality that privacy is a fundamental part of professional truth. By applying these labels to evidence, claims, names, and AI inputs, it gives you the exact tools you need to ensure your proof doesn't mistakenly turn into permission.
Right.
It lets you navigate a complex, confidential career without having to erase your own history.
And from my perspective, while the taxonomy is beautifully constructed in theory, the friction required to actually operationalize it introduces significant risk.
Okay.
When you ask someone to constantly parse the difference between shareable with care and summary only, and apply those tags to abstract memories while dodging AI ingestion, you risk overcomplicating the record. That cognitive load threatens to expose the very data the system is trying to protect.
Well, it is clear we both agree on the foundational principles here. The full record absolutely has to be private by default, and the worker must own their source layer.
We do. And we certainly agree that AI poses a massive immediate risk to professional confidentiality if it's used improperly.
Exactly. Where we diverge is on the mechanics of the safeguard itself. I see this highly granular taxonomy as an empowering tool, and you see it as a potential source of human error under the weight of its own complexity.
And that is a tension every professional is going to have to navigate in the real world.
Indeed. There is a lot more to explore in this framework, particularly how these labels interact with that privacy log to systematically track forbidden uses over time.
Definitely.
Looking at your own professional evidence through the lens of privacy governance fundamentally changes how you view your career history.
It forces you to respect the boundaries of the work you've done and the people you did it with.
Exactly. Professional truth is not about reckless transparency. So think back to the beginning of our conversation. If governing your professional record is like managing a vault, we aren't just deciding whether a single heavy door is locked or wide open.
Right.
We are deciding exactly which pieces of our history can be brought out into the light, which must be carefully described without ever being shown, and which must remain securely in the dark. How you label that truth will ultimately determine whether your record is a tool of empowerment or a massive liability. Thank you for joining us on the debate.